How was this missed?
This was the largest operational and intelligence failure in the history of the Israeli military and Israeli government. You essentially have the equivalent of 6 9/11s plus captives by the way in which Hamas was able to execute this operation 2 days ago. Beyond that, it's as if though one does not realize this is the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust in one day that has taken place in that area. And Israel's response will be disproportionate insofar as it relates to rooting out Hamas from Gaza, root and stem. This will not be over until Hamas loses control of the Gaza Strip.
How do you think the Israelis are going to respond, right? Beyond just, as you say, getting rid of Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip, I mean, is this now a real risk that this is going to go beyond, right, in new fronts on the West Bank or even as far as Lebanon?
The West Bank is already starting to act up. There was an attack from Lebanon yesterday in the afternoon on an area called Har Dov, which is in Israel's north. And I wouldn't be surprised if Israel even goes so far as to extend its long saber to take out targets in areas where Hamas militants find refuge, whether that be in Beirut, whether that be in Doha in Qatar, whether that even be in Turkey, where Hamas has a branch. And at the end of the day, the real address for where Israel has to deliver its true response is in Tehran, in Iran. So this is not the beginning of the Gaza war, which will end in Gaza. This is the beginning of a new Middle East war, which will end in Iran.
Okay, well, I'm afraid to ask you how to map that out for us.
Sure.
We're trying to figure out how long we'll be in this situation, what type of escalation, and when we'll see that. Greg, yeah, just if you could just lay that out for us.
Sure. So I don't mean to shake the markets too much, but this is just a stone-cold analysis, and I hope I'm wrong about this. But you have to reverse your way in terms of looking at history of how this operation came to unfold. First and foremost, about 6 months ago, there were attacks, rocket attacks from Lebanon, which landed on northern Israel, which were not started by Hezbollah, the preeminent Shia power there, but were actually claimed to have been from Hamas. So Hamas was able to open up a third front against Israel: Gaza, the West Bank, and now Lebanon. Those attacks were supported with material and logistics from Hezbollah, even though they didn't pull the trigger. Going beyond that, you have to look 5 years ago to when Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, relocated from Gaza to Doha in the country of Qatar, where Hamas leader Khaled Mashal was already based. So you have the finances and the executive operations taking place out of Doha. You have operations now in Lebanon in addition to the West Bank and Gaza. But even beyond that, most of the money which flows to Hamas goes through Turkey. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned different Turkish banks and Turkish individuals only 7 or 8 months ago, specifically for the reason of violating U.S. anti-terrorism money laundering laws, which were put in place to stop funding to Hamas. And the reason Treasury targeted Turkish individuals and Turkish banks is because they were able to prove that they were responsible for facilitating money to this terror organization. And the entire umbrella over everything, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and other Islamist militant organizations throughout the Middle East, is the funding and the logistical operations and the backing of Tehran. They openly claim to be responsible for it. They celebrate it on their television stations, and they encourage this to go to the aspects of a regional war, moving beyond what was the shadow war previously being conducted between 2017 and Friday before Saturday's attacks. So those 4 or 5 elements all have to be taken into consideration of how Israel will respond.
I know the Middle East Forum is going to be submitting their proposals in some way of what the U.S. should be doing in light of this development. What do you think is D.C. likely going to respond? How are they likely to respond?
So I think that Congress is yearning for policy prescriptions for dealing with this problem. This is the worst disaster to ever take place on a non-state level with the state of Israel. And since 1948, the U.S. has had its back. So I think Congress will pass a resolution as soon as the House gets its act back together. The Senate will then pass it. And then I think the president will sign it. And you'll see action by the United States and all the tools of its power, not just to save Americans in Gaza, but to stand by Israel in its time of need.